and on behalf of the American people, say how pleased and privileged we are to have you among us. We're just returning from a mission of peace, and I can think of no more fitting close to this journey than to be here in the presence of Your Holiness, who has worked so diligently for recognition of the rights and dignity of the individual and for peace among nations.
I am deeply honored by the presence of President Reagan, who himself is just returning from an important trip to China. Mr. President, I thank you for your kind welcome on my arrival, and I wish to reaffirm through you my friendship and esteem for all the citizens of your great nation.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and welcome to this month's Live From at the Reagan Library. Remember, we do these on the first Wednesday of every month. So last month, we opened up a brand new special exhibition here at the Reagan Library, and the exhibition focuses on the story and the history of St. John Paul II, as well as his relationship with President Ronald Reagan, and how together the two of them fought against communism and championed peace and democracy. So in this month's Live From, we are going to share with you some of the highlights of this exhibition, show you some of the artifacts. We will also be playing a handful of video clips from an interview we did with Father Richard Kunst, who loaned us many of the objects you'll see in this exhibition. And like always, we want to engage with you. So whether you're watching us live on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, please, 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 right now, go to that comment box section, tell me your name, where you're watching from so I can say hi, or ask a question about this exhibition or the Reagan Library or Ronald Reagan. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to be going to those screens, gosh, at least a half a dozen times, so please don't be shy and say hi so I can say hello to you. So let's talk about this exhibition. So to do that, we have to go back in time and give you a little bit of history about the Pope. So we have to go back to in May of 1920 in Poland, when Karol Joseph Wojtyla was born. At the age of 18, he moved to Krakow to go to university. He studied philology, and he actually learned 15 languages. He was able to use those languages while he was Pope. In his senior year in university, his father sadly passed away, and it really made Karol Wojtyla think about his life, and he decided he wanted to join the priesthood. But at that time, it was actually basically against communist Polish rule. You couldn't be a priest. And so he entered a clandestine seminary, and in 1946, he was appointed as a priest. Now, while he was a priest, Father Wojtyla, he loved to take students hiking and camping, skiing, a whole bunch kayaking. And while he'd be doing these outdoor activities with them, he would of course lead them in theological discussions, he would lead them in prayer sessions. But again, because he could be persecuted, he could be arrested for being a priest, he would have them call him uncle, sort of as a way to hide his true vocation. Now that nickname of uncle stuck with him his entire life, and even when he was the Pope, he was often called uncle. In 1958, Pope Pius XII actually appointed Father Wojtyla as a bishop, making him the youngest bishop in Polish history. And in 1964, Pope Paul VI made him made him an archbishop, and 3 years later, in 1967, he made him a cardinal. Now, a handful of years later, there was a changing of the popes. Pope John Paul I was named the new pope, and just 33 days after Pope John Paul I became pope, he actually passed away. Another conclave was held, and Cardinal Wojtyla was named the next pope. 256th pope, the 450 years since a Italian pope had been named, and at the age of 58, Pope John Paul II became the youngest pope since the 1850s. Now, as Pope, Pope John Paul II met with 5 different U.S. presidents, of course one of them being President Reagan. Mrs. Reagan once said that the Pope was the president's closest friend, and President Reagan himself once even called the Pope his best friend. So let's talk about what is over my shoulder here. This great photograph and this large mural behind me is a photo of the Pope and the President. They met many times throughout President Reagan's presidency, but this photo specifically is from 1987 when they met in Miami, Florida, at the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens. You can see in the photograph they're sitting in these Louis XIV style chairs. And behind me are the actual chairs they were sitting in. I think in this whole exhibition, these chairs might be my favorite artifact. So these are the actual chairs they were sitting in on loan from the Vizcaya Museum. Following this meeting, President Reagan did give remarks to the American people, and we're going to give you a clip of those remarks.
For the second time this year, I have met in private audience with His Holiness Pope John Paul II. We discussed the practical aspects of ideals we share, peace, justice, and the expansion of freedom. We agreed that, as the Pope first remarked when I visited him at the Vatican City in 1982, peace is not only the absence of war, it also involves reciprocal trust between nations.
Okay, so we are back. One more quick little history lesson and recap. The Pope and the President bonded over many things. Again, as I said earlier, their fight against communism, their love of peace, their love of democracy, their belief in faith. But oddly, they also bonded over what happened in 1981. As I'm sure you all recall, in March of 1981, President Reagan survived an assassination attempt on his life. And just 6 weeks later, in May of 1981, the Pope survived one as well. Now, the Pope was critically wounded when he was shot while addressing an audience in St. Peter's Square. And upon hearing the shocking news of the shooting, President Reagan issued a message to the Pope. I'm going to read you that message. He wrote, "Your Holiness, I have just received the shocking news of the attack on you. All Americans join me in hopes and prayers for your speedy recovery from the injuries you have suffered in the attack. Our prayers are with you, Ronald Reagan." Now, why do I bring up the assassination attempts other than the fact that it did oddly bond them? I share that with you because it actually leads to the next artifact we are going to show with you, which is the Popemobile. We're going to cut to a different video. So I am standing next to a 1998 Cadillac DeVille Parade Phaeton, otherwise known as the Popemobile. Now, this vehicle was built in 1998 and delivered to the Pope. But again, just a moment ago, we talked about the assassination attempt on the Pope's life. And because of that assassination attempt, he actually was not able or allowed to ride in open air vehicles like this one. Although he wasn't able to ride in it, it was created for him, it was delivered to him, he did bless it, but again, he never rode in it. Because it didn't fit in our actual exhibition space, we put it here on our second floor as part of our other motorcade that President Reagan was in. We thought it was a fitting place for the Popemobile. Fact, right? So before I share the next artifact, I want to give you a little heads up. I'm probably 30 seconds away from going to the screens for the first time. So again, don't be shy. Put in your name, where you're watching from, so I can say hi. As I always say with you guys, it's my favorite part of doing these live froms. So I am now standing next to a mitre. A mitre is liturgical headdress worn by abbots and popes and bishops. Bishop Wojtyla wore this mitre. This is his. And then when he became Pope, he continued to wear it. And rather than me give you the full history of it, we're going to cut to a clip of Father Kunst to talk to you about the mitre, because this is one of the objects he loaned to us.
All right, so this is a mitre, and a mitre is Episcopal garb, not just for a pope. And so you'll see any bishop wear something like this. This is, you can tell a papal mitre because on the lappets of the mitre has the Pope's coat of arms. So you can see very clearly there on each of the lappets.
So we're looking at the screens. We have Facebook up. Our good friend from Japan is watching as always, which we love so much. Looking at some of the questions he's asked. And I'm just going to ask the gentleman who's going to the screens to see if there's anything on, not right now. Okay, so please, 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 if you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, go in and just say hi. Tell me your name and where you're watching from so I can say hello. It's that easy. So we will go back to that again, probably about in the next minute or so. So I will go back to those screens, but please do say hi. We love it so much. I'm going to cut over to the screens, to the cases over here and talk to you about some of the artifacts we have on display. This one is relevant because it's one of President Reagan's favorite items. This ivory Madonna next to me was gifted from the Pope to President Reagan when they met for the first time in 1982. It's an ivory Madonna carved out of tusk. President Reagan so loved this gift that he displayed it in his home with Mrs. Reagan in Bel Air, California. So a pretty special artifact that meant a lot to President Reagan. The second item we're going to showcase in this case is this zucchetto. And to talk to you about this, we are going to go back to Father Kunst.
I've had this for a number of years. I don't know how long I've had it. I got it from a collector in Austria. And it is very historical because it is the actual red zucchetto that Cardinal Wojtyła got when he was made a cardinal by Pope Paul VI in 1967. So this is the actual original zucchetto that he wore when he was named a cardinal during the ceremony that he was made a cardinal.
Out of curiosity, and we don't have to include this if you don't want us to include it, but how does something like this go up for auction or available for people to have?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't at auction. I got it directly from the person who had it, and he got it from the secretary of the Pope from a long, long time ago. So he knew where it was from and how it came about. But, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of stories about how these things get out. In Italy, in Europe in particular, lots of religious orders are like folding for lack of vocations, and a lot of those things are, a lot of their belongings tend to get out of the market. Other people, popes, like presidents, give gifts a lot, and so sometimes those gifts also get on the market after the person has been deceased or something like that.
This might be a weird question, but as a Catholic priest, I mean, what does the Pope mean to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Pope is, you know, he's the vicar of Christ. From a Catholic standpoint, he's our main shepherd. As vicar of Christ, vicar means voice, and so he's a special Christ representative on earth. And so he's the rock in which the church is based on and founded on, so he's our chief shepherd. So the Pope is very, very important from the Catholic perspective as our leader and our primary shepherd.
Were you, I mean, you don't look old, so
Thank you.
Were you obviously in the church as a boy, but were you in the church as a father, any kind of role when the Pope actually was Pope?
Pope John Paul? Oh yeah, I met John Paul II 7 times. So I met him on 7 separate occasions. And so I was inspired at a very early age from John Paul II. You know, one of the few people I love more than Ronald Reagan is John Paul II. So this is just a great combination for this, for me personally, for this type of exhibit. And so, yeah, I mean, a huge influence on me. And just, John Paul II makes me want to be a better priest.
So the last item in this case we're going to talk about before I move on to another case is this letter to my left. So we talked about during the earlier section how President Reagan issued a message to the Pope following the assassination attempt on the Pope's life. The President also wrote a handwritten letter to the Pope, and this is a draft of that handwritten letter, so pretty special. We are now going to take a walk. And it's really important that we talk about this item, and I'll share why with you in a second. We're going to go to this bust of St. John Paul II. This bust was commissioned by the Friends of the John Paul II Foundation. It is done by sculptor Gordon Cray. And the Friends of the John Paul II Foundation didn't just commission this bust, they actually permanently gifted it to us here at the Reagan Foundation. When they offered it to us about a year ago, and we were trying to figure out where in the Reagan Museum we could put it on display, it sort of became embarrassingly obvious that we didn't do a good job within the actual museum telling the story of the Pope's relationship with President Reagan. And that's where the idea of this exhibition was born. I will tell you that when this exhibition ends, we are putting this bust on permanent display in the exhibition, the main exhibition of the Reagan Museum, and we'll continue to tell the story of the relationship of the Pope and the President. But again, that's how this actual exhibition started, was with this bust. Now, the artist, Gordon Cray, is a well-known artist. He has a lot of art actually in the Washington, D.C. area. In fact, he has a very well-known sculpture of the Virgin Mary that's on display in St. Andrew's Cathedral. So before we go to the next case, let's go back to the screens one more time. If you watch these, you know I have to put on my glasses to see what you guys have said. Hello, Ben from Louisiana, Michael from Modesto, California. James is asking how long the exhibition is open and what else he can see. Great question, James. This exhibition is open now through October 27th. That is it. What is that, three and a half weeks from now? So you really need to come see it because, again, I'm only giving you little highlights of what's on display here. There's so much more to see. But a single ticket to the Reagan Museum gets you everything. So you're seeing the full Reagan Museum, you're seeing the Air Force One Pavilion, you're seeing the special exhibition. If you come before October 13th, so if you come in the next 11 days, you will also see our Star Wars exhibition. I know we've talked about it a couple of times, but just about 2 weeks ago, we added a whole nother couple dozen new items in that exhibition. So always something new. So even if you saw it before, you should come back and see it again. So thank you for that great question. Let's see, Alexis Giller, hi from SCV. Hi, Alexis, my daughter. I always appreciate when my family watches. I also appreciate that you're in SCV and not San Francisco. We've got, it looks like John from Ash Fork, Arizona. Jim from Appleton, Wisconsin. Appreciate all of you so much for tuning in. It's also not lost on me, although we are standing in an exhibition on the Pope. Tonight starts Rosh Hashanah. So for any of you out there who might be watching here who are Jewish, Lashana Tova. So thank you all. I see a couple of other questions. We can go back to that. And then it looks like maybe Mizra Beg says hi. So hi back to you. We will be going back to those screens really soon. So keep please saying hi again, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. We can chat live with you on any of those channels. So don't be shy. We're going to go to this case here, which has a couple of pretty incredible items actually. So we talked about how Father Wojtyla, who was a priest, became a bishop. And when he was Father Wojtyla and he was being called over to be appointed or anointed as bishop, this is the actual train pass that he used to get himself over to where he was appointed as bishop. It's pretty incredible. And I'm going to ask for a thumbs up or thumbs down because I'm forgetting. I think we might be hearing from Father Kunst on this. Yes? We're going to cut to Father Kunst.
It is a great piece. It's one of the coolest pieces in my collection. Anything that is like of identification from somebody that became super significant back in their past life. But this is very significant in a unique way because this was his train pass that he had in the year of 1958, which was the year he was named a bishop. And so George Weigel is the biographer of Pope John Paul II. And Weigel, in his book, Witness to Hope, spends a couple pages on the day he was made bishop, that he was named bishop and was told of that, and how he had to take the train. And so even in the biography, the story of the train pass, even though it wasn't mentioned, that this super important part of John Paul II's life is actually recorded in the biography of Witness to Hope by George Weigel, and this is the pass that he would have been carrying in his pocket during that time.
Okay, back to the case. Thank you, Father Kunst. This is also a pretty cool item. If you remember in the beginning, I talked about how Father Wojtyla loved to take students in outdoor activities, but he couldn't be called father for fear of persecution, so they called him uncle, and that nickname of uncle stuck with him his entire life. Here we actually have a letter or postcard that references uncle, which I think is pretty cool. And then on the far end of the case, we have some medals or some coins that were gifted from the Pope to President Reagan after their visit in Alaska in 1984. There's the image of the Pope on one side of the coins and then the image of Christ crucified on the other. We are going to go to this case, another pretty remarkable item on display. I think this, along with the chairs, might be my other really favorite item. This is an actual Bible that the Pope gifted to President Reagan. And on the inside of the Bible, he also inscribed the page, which I'm going to read. The Pope wrote, "To the Honorable Ronald Reagan, President of the United States of America, involving upon him the strength and peace that comes from the word of the God." So let's go to our last case, and then we're going to go back to those screens. That's your warning. Say hello. Please, please say hello. So in this case, we have this large bowl here in the back. It's actually called a ciborium. It's bowls that were used in masses, but what makes this bowl pretty neat and kind of ties back in, when the Pope visited Los Angeles in 1987 and led Mass, this is one of the bowls he used to give Mass in 1987. And I believe it might be our last Father Kunst clip, so we're going to go there really quick.
And then the second item is a ciborium from Mass in Los Angeles in 1987. Pope John Paul II went there, and a ciborium is a bowl, in essence, that holds Holy Communion during a Mass. And so that would have been used during the Mass that the Pope celebrated in Los Angeles in 1987.
So the last item in this case, before I go back to those screens, if you recall in the beginning when I was standing in front of those really beautiful chairs from Vizcaya Gardens, we heard a small clip from President Reagan in the remarks he gave to the American people following that meeting. Well, in this case, we actually have President Reagan's original speech cards that he used to give that address. So let's go back to those screens. I am being told there's something else there, so I'll put on my glasses so I can see. AZ, you folks have a lot of amazing history there. Thank you so much. It's really important to us. Obviously, this is the museum about Ronald Reagan, so obviously it's very important to tell the life story of Ronald Reagan, but we also want to make sure we bring to you so many other ideas and cultural exhibitions. So this exhibition is just one of the ways in which we do that. Ben Smith is asking, are other gifts from world leaders to President Reagan on display? There are. We have a whole section in the main museum that has actual gifts to the president, and there are some crazy ones. We're talking about a portrait of Ronald Reagan made out of moth wings. I think it was Sri Lanka that actually gifted President Reagan an actual elephant. Now, of course, the elephant isn't on display. The elephant was then gifted to the National Zoo, but we have a photo of that. So we have a whole section of gifts, which is pretty cool, to the president and to Mrs. Reagan. And I thought I saw someone else said hi. Bobby, arriving late to the stream from Texas. Thank you, Bobby, so much. And I know there was another hello that scrolled and I missed it, so we might be able to find it. It was near Ben's question, if that helps the good friend here that's Alan Griffin from Texas. I think I might have gotten that one. Thank you all so much. And we are going to go back to those screens again, so please keep them coming. I'm going to probably go back in about 45 to 60 seconds for our last time. So that's your warning. So please, please, please say hi. We're going to come over here and talk about the last object in this exhibition that we're going to highlight. Again, I'm touching upon, I don't know, I've lost track, a dozen, a little bit more than a dozen, and there are so many more items on display in this exhibition. To the question that Ben asked, it's only here till October 27th, so don't delay, you're kind of running out of time to come see this exhibition. But I wanted to talk about this because this is pretty cool. The photo that you see here of the President and the Pope strolling gardens, this is from the same meeting of the ones with the chairs from September of 1987 when the two met in Miami, Florida at Vizcaya Museum and Gardens. This is them strolling in the gardens. A large statue of this photo, you can see the smaller version of the statue, was erected in Gdansk, Poland in 2013 in honor of the Solidarity movement. A maquette, this is a maquette, a smaller version of a statue. The maquette was then made of the large statue, and the maquette was gifted to Michael Reagan, and Michael Reagan lent his maquette to us for this exhibition. So that's a pretty cool little piece of story. So now you're going to walk with me while I walk back to the beginning and sort of wrap this exhibition up. So again, open through October 27th, one ticket price to see everything. And on the off chance you come before October 13th, you also see our Star Wars exhibition. You get to walk on board Air Force One, Marine One, see the Berlin Wall, see our Oval Office display, see those gifts someone asked about, all those really cool things. You can just simply come into the main lobby and buy a ticket, or to learn more or to pre-purchase tickets, you go to reaganlibrary.com/pope. It's that easy, reaganlibrary.com/pope. I'm going to put on these spectacles one last time to see if anyone else is saying hello. Pope John Paul II, my grandma loved, and Princess Diana. Yes, us too. And Princess Diana had a wonderful relationship with President and Mrs. Reagan, actually as did Prince Charles, now king of course. Taylor, what do you find the most interesting piece in the museum from South Carolina? Ooh, there's so many cool things. I think, believe it or not, that my two favorite Reagan-related items, because I think they're so cool, is to talk about what I said a minute ago, that portrait of Ronald Reagan made out of moth wings, because I'm just so amazed by what people do. There's also a stunning piece of art that President Reagan displayed at Rancho del Cielo that we have on display here in the Reagan Museum. It's the presidential seal made entirely out of nails that someone made for him. Obviously a big brown wooden base, and then the seal is made completely out of nails, and it's stunning. And he loved it so much it was on display at Rancho del Cielo. What item do I love most in the museum that isn't Ronald Reagan related? Every State of the Union address, President Reagan would mention at least one, but usually 2, 3, 4, 5 American heroes that had really struck his heart that year. And so we have a whole gallery here at the library dedicated to American heroes. And in that gallery, we have an actual piece of the North Tower of the World Trade Center that went down on 9/11 to honor those heroes who lost their lives that day. And unrelated to Ronald Reagan, that's my favorite item on display. Beyond the bust of Pope John Paul II are other items highlighting the relationship with President Reagan on display at the library. So again, we did this exhibition because we don't really do a good job of talking about the Pope in our main museum. So we will rectify that when this exhibition closes. We will bring that bust and tell the story into the main galleries in our gallery that focuses on bringing peace throughout the world, and how Ronald Reagan helped those across, not just the United States, but across the world to fight peace, to help bring peace to their area and to fight communism. Thank you for these live streams. Thank you for watching. My gosh, we do them every month, and we hope that they land, and we hope you enjoy them, and we really appreciate hearing from you that they do. Our next month one, we're still working on what that topic will be, so don't forget to tune in the first Wednesday of November. Thank you all so much for joining us. We know you have so much to do, as well as perhaps even maybe supposed to be at Temple, so thank you for tuning in. We are going to conclude this month's Live From a little differently. We are going to go to our last clip of Father Kunst, who shares why he thinks you should come see this exhibition, and then we're going to hear one last time from President Reagan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Ronald Reagan viewed Pope John Paul II as his best friend, and he referenced that a number of times. So did Nancy Reagan. And the two of them really connected, and here you're going to be able to see things that were very tangible in relation to both of them and the relationship. And so I would certainly encourage anybody that's interested in that relationship, which helped bring the fall of the Iron Curtain, to come and see this exhibit for sure.
In a violent world, Your Holiness, you have been a minister of peace and love. Your words, your prayers, your example have made you, for those who suffer oppression or the violence of war, a source of solace, inspiration, and hope.
Openness to others begins in the heart. As I stated at the beginning of this year in my message for the World Day of Peace, if men and women hope to transform society, they must begin by changing their own hearts first. Only with a new heart can one discover, rediscover clear-sightedness and impartiality with freedom of spirit, the sense of justice with respect to the rights of man, the sense of equity with global solidarity between the rich and the poor, mutual trust and fraternal love.